that is a very nice welcome. Very nice. I appreciate it. Very spontaneous. So thank you. Thanks, Jess, for having me here today. I appreciate it. So what I wanted to chat a little bit with you guys about today, and first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm excited to be here. Is the importance of bravery in marketing and why that's so important really in today's marketing landscape and in the world that is really so focused on technology and data and how we intercept kind of the art and the science of marketing. And if you look at just the technical definition of bravery, it's this idea of the quality or state of having or showing mental or moral strength to face danger, fear, or difficulty. So those are really powerful words when you think about them in the business context. But from the lens of a CMO, why are they so important? Well, they're important for a number of reasons. First and foremost, the CMO seat, especially these days, is a hot seat. The average tenure for a CMO is 18 months, according to a recent study. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, but 80% of CEOs actually say that they don't trust their CMO. And we'll get into that. But having bravery is a path forward. This idea of kind of facing danger, fear, or difficulty, I think aligns really well with this idea that I'm talking about. And I think in a world where people are so overwhelmed with choice and people have so little time in their day anymore, that you have to be brave to break through. And as marketers, that's what we're really trying to do. We're trying to break through and make emotional engagements with people, and it's more difficult than ever before. And I think we know a little bit about bravery if you think about my company, Ally Financial, and what we did. So think about the fact that, like you guys, we're a pretty young company. 10 years ago, we didn't even exist, which is hard to believe. And what we did is we launched in the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. We were spun off from General Motors. We were GM's captive auto finance company, and GM was going through its bankruptcy and needed liquidity. And so the idea was to sell the captive. And all of a sudden, we found ourselves in a marketplace where we had been engineered and built to do one thing, and that was to serve auto loans to GM dealers. Suddenly, we're in this complete financial crisis, whereas markets are crashing down. There's no access to liquidity. We have no mothership anymore. GM is gone. And we had to change or die. And we had thousands of people that were depending on us as employees of Ally. But bigger than that, we had 17,000 dealers that were dependent on us to survive. And we had really the responsibility of a huge impact on the American economy if GMAC went down. And so what we had to do is start from scratch. And we had to rethink the way that we were going to go to market completely. And we really felt like there was this huge opportunity. And everybody was saying to us, what are you going to do? And our thought was, we're going to launch a bank. And the bank is going to become the deposit gathering capability that will fund the auto loans, and we'll kind of reinvent ourselves to be able to have the ability to do that. And we're not going to just create a normal bank. We're going to create a digital bank because we needed to get to market quickly. We didn't have time for infrastructure to build brick and mortar locations, and we were on a very short time frame in order to be able to start generating revenue before our liquidity ran out. Kind of complicating that is the government came to us and said, we're going to close down Chrysler Capital, and we want you to take on all the Chrysler dealers as well. So that added significant pressure to our timeline and to what it was that we needed to do. And everybody was saying a bank, you know, the world doesn't need another bank. That's the last thing anybody wants is another bank. And our mantra at the time was this notion that, yeah, the world doesn't need another bank, but it needs a better bank. And we took this bet that everybody would be banking in the palm of their hand. Now, it seems really intuitive now, 10 years later, as you watch all these big companies scramble to get to digital financial services solutions, but 10 years ago, there was nobody out in the category like us. We also saw a ton of pain points in the category. You know, people were either completely apathetic, they weren't paying any attention to how their banks were treating them. And if you think about it, in a lot of ways, we were putting up with things that as consumers, we shouldn't be putting up with. Like, why should I pay $5 to get my money out of the wall? Think about it, you still do it today. Why do I have my money sitting at a bank that doesn't pay any interest on my savings? People still do it today. You know, why can't I have 24/7 service? Money's a really important thing. I work really hard for my money. My family depends on my money. Yet if it's past 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock and something happens, I can't talk to anybody at a bank. You know, why is everything so confusing? Why is the jargon so confusing? Why do banks purposely try and confuse you and hide things from you, whether they're hidden fees, kind of this bait and switch mentality? So a lot of pain points. And we really felt like there was this huge opportunity and a better way forward, and that really is what created Ally. So literally in a 6-month period of time, back during that financial crisis, a very small group of us pretty much spent the whole entire summer in New York with a branding company and an advertising agency, and we came up with what we thought was a better way forward. And we created Ally. The launch was really different. We really took on the big banks. What we wanted to do was kind of create this awakening. We wanted to reach out and shake people and get them to pay attention to what was happening in the category and also what was happening to their money. And so we launched in a really loud and disruptive way. And you know, as a marketer at the time, this was really a brave campaign. And I'll talk a little bit about how it did. I'll talk a little bit about some of the reaction and some of the things that occurred as a result. But the whole business model itself was brave, but also the way that we came to market, I think, is a great example of that. So let me play a couple of spots that you guys may or may not remember. This is the way that Ally came to market.
Have some fun with that truck. Okay, time's up. Here you go. That's a nice one. I made that.
The piece of junk. The red truck.
Well, you can't have the red truck. See, that was a limited time offer only. It's right here in the fine print.
Even kids know it's wrong to hide behind fine print. Why don't banks? We're Ally, a new bank whose rates will always be among the top, with nothing buried in the fine print. It's just the right thing to do.
Would you like a pony?
Yeah.
Would you like a pony?
Yeah.
Here you go. This is for you.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
Well, you didn't say I could have a real one.
Well, you didn't ask.
Even kids know it's wrong to hold out on somebody. Why don't banks? We're Ally, a new bank that alerts you when your money can be working harder and earning more. It's just the right thing to do.
So a really bold way to come to market in a category that had always done just really boring, really plain type of advertising. Everything about what we did was brave, including the color, right? A purple bank. I mean, what we did is we put up on the wall all bank advertising, and everything was either red, white, or blue. If you think about it, like look around today, you'll see the same thing. And so we thought, we want to stand out. We're going to be a digital bank. We want to do something different, and we chose the color purple. You know, these spots, the idea was RJ represented the big banks, and we wanted to clearly call out how dishonorably banks were behaving, and the fact that even little kids recognize when something is wrong. Everything was shot hidden camera. All the cameramen were in those play structures that you kind of saw in the background there. The kids thought that they were coming in for focus groups, and we got real reactions. And you know, they just blew up. I mean, it resonated. It created that emotional connection with people right away. I remember shooting the one with Pony, and we shot a bunch of different kids just to get the best reactions. And we shot these two sisters, and they came in and they did the, you know, RJ did the, do you want a pony? Yes. Do you want a pony? And I was sitting with their mom in the green room, and when the other sister got the real pony, the other little sister turned to her and punched her right in the face. I'm like, I really want to use that one, but we decided to go with this one instead. But it was a really great way for us to come to market. And it really helped us build a brand, and it helped us get on the landscape very, very quickly. And if you kind of fast forward now 10 years later and look at how we've done, it's been unbelievable. We have 1.4 million customers of Ally Bank. On the auto side, 4.5 million customers, so all totaled about 5.5 million customers that we do business with today. In 10 years, almost $95 billion in deposits. And this is for something where there's no brick and mortar. People are just interacting with us online. And we've grown to be a top 25 bank. Our bank CEO was named one of the top 10 most powerful women in banking last year. And we've built a company from the ground up by being brave and going to market in a very different way, and creating something where we saw a ton of white space and a ton of opportunity in a time where there was a category that needed to be disrupted and a category that needed to be shaken up. The other thing that we've done along the way is we've built this incredibly magical brand. And our CEO talks about his 6 strategic priorities. And the one thing that he talks about in his priorities is brand as a weapon. And I think that's a huge testament to what we've done from a marketing perspective, because marketing's been a catalyst for helping build this brand, and then having the right internal inertia, much like you guys do, to back up the promise of what the brand stands for. A couple years ago, Boston Consulting Group did a list of the up-and-coming brands to watch. And it was, it was Hulu, it was Tesla, it was GoPro, it was Snapchat, it was Airbnb, and Ally. No other banks on that list, and no Fortune 500 companies on that list. Last year, Gale and Segal did a list of their top disruptor brands. And same kind of list, Uber and Grubhub and Airbnb and Spotify and Ally. So very different kinds of brands, but it underscores what we've done and how we've been disruptive and how we've used bravery to really create an entirely new category on something, if you think about it, that's been around for over 100 years. So as we kind of fast forward now, 10 years later, and look at where we're at, last year we made a big strategic pivot. And we decided that we were going to expand our product portfolio. Given how much consumers really liked doing business with us on the banking side, and the fact that we only had savings products, we wanted to expand rapidly. So we bought a company, and we launched an all online investing platform, so self-directed and managed portfolios. We stood up very quickly a mortgage capability. We partnered with another company, and we stood up a credit card. And we purchased a company in California to do direct-to-consumer auto lending, kind of like a lending tree model, but to have the ability to be able to reach into consumers and not just have to work with the dealers on indirect lending, but give us that indirect lending platform. We're also in the process of completely reinventing our auto business to be the digital choice for dealers. As dealers' businesses are transforming, and that category is finally starting to catch up to the rest of the retail world, how do we power dealers so that any way that a consumer wants to interact with them digitally, we can be at the center of those interactions, giving them what they need from a lending standpoint. So this necessitated a change in pace in terms of how we were going to market. And again, we needed to be very disruptive, and we needed to be very brave. We're in a category that spends ferociously. The financial services category spends over $2 billion a year on advertising, and we're less than 2% share of voice in that category. So for me, the challenge was, how do we kind of outwit, outlast, and outplay? How do we break through and do things that are very different than what everybody else is doing in the category? So we repositioned ourselves, moving to this positioning of a relentless ally for your financial well-being. And we created a campaign that we wanted to kind of humanize ourselves. Since we didn't have brick and mortar and people couldn't walk into a branch, we wanted to do something that was fun, something that was differentiated, that showed the people of Ally being relentless and kind of going over the top and doing things in a really interesting way for our customers. So we tried to be disruptive in literally everything we did. We used disruptive creative. I'm going to show you a couple pieces of creative in a second. Really changed up our look in terms of our graphic design and our visual look. I mean, when you kind of look at this plum and our people in the advertising and the headlines, they had that clever wit, and they just broke through. They weren't like anything else that you were seeing in our category, or really in any other category for that matter. We used really differentiated media. So we partnered with a lot of content providers that we had never partnered with before. You know, Pop Sugar and Vice. We did a really cool promotion called Lucky Penny, where we actually got this idea that people hate pennies. You know, the US government is thinking about not minting pennies anymore. They stopped minting pennies in Canada. I get them and I throw them out, or you always leave them in that little jar at the convenience store because no one wants to carry them around. And so we wanted to create something interesting around this idea that a penny saved is a penny earned, and that even the smallest amount of savings can go a long way. And so we hid 10 pennies in 10 cities across the country, each worth $1,000. They were Ally branded pennies. And we used social media to push out clues about where those pennies were. And we created this unbelievable groundswell of activity around people getting together and trying to go find those pennies. And the stories that came out of it were unbelievable. And it got so big that Jimmy Kimmel actually did a segment on it, where Guillermo actually went outside in LA, set up a tent, and had people come in, where he had a sign outside that said, "A penny for your thoughts." And they filmed all this really funny content of people coming in, asking Guillermo a question, him answering the question with something outrageous that made literally no sense, collecting all these pennies and then looking for the LA Lucky Penny. So these were ways where we were able to get our brand in front of people in really different and unique use of media. We created a lot of really interesting partnerships, partnered with influencers that we had never partnered with before, people like Big and Rich, who are very differentiated people in the country music space that do things their own way, and Danny Coker. We sponsored ICC, which is the International Soccer Friendlies. We even created an entire fragrance line around the idea that people's favorite smell is the smell of a new car. So we created a line of fragrances called New Car Smell. And we had 15 different fragrances that we displayed at auto shows that were all around this idea of SUV smell and minivan smell. We had people walking around auto shows with scent strips, handing them out, just like when you go into a department store. You had the ability on an iPad to create your own scent. And then we surprised 50 people from each auto show, and we actually made their scent and sent it to them. So really just different ways to go out and do interesting things. We created something called our Disruptor Calendar. And we did things like Lucky Penny. We created an app called a Splurge Alert app. And what you did with the Splurge Alert app is you actually downloaded the app, and then you could go into it and you put into the app what your financial kryptonite is. So for me, it might be like Nordstrom's or a Prada store or a car dealership or a wine store. And then we geo-fenced those locations. And every time you walked into one of those locations, you got an alert from the Ally Splurge Alert app that would say, like, "Andrea, get the hell out of there last time you were there." You know, it was a bad scene. And they were all really fun and humorous. And then you actually got to pick Splurge Buddies, and it pushed an alert to your Splurge Buddies, kind of like AA, not that I'd know. And those people could text you and say, "What are you doing? Like, you're saving for your kids' college, get out of Nordstrom." So it was a really fun way to get people to think about their money differently without preaching to them. And then we really went on the offensive with PR. But we had never really used earned media as anything but reactive. And so we went out and got very, I think, differentiated and brave in terms of what we were doing with PR. One of the things that we did that was just really interesting is we're an online bank. And if you're an online bank, your phone needs to be charged at every moment, because if you want to interact with your money, you need a phone that's working. So we actually had drones that were branded with the Ally logo, and we passed out phone chargers in malls through these drones. And it was just a really cool way. They were Ally branded phone chargers, and we got a ton of PR out of it, a lot of earned media, and it was a really interesting and disruptive way to do something different. Now, the one common thread that I can tell you through all of this is that every single point of it, somebody told me how dumb the idea was. Somebody told me that it was a dangerous thing to do for our brand. Somebody told me why it would fail. Somebody told me why we shouldn't do it. And the one thing that we did the entire way is we filtered out the noise. And we put our heads down and we used the golden gut and we believed in what we were doing and we pushed forward. I can't tell you how many things like the Splurge Alert app where somebody said to me, what's the business case for this? Let me see what the ROI is going to be on this. What are your KPIs? And that's kind of the world we live in today. You know, everything's testable and everybody wants to know what the data says. And while you have to use the data to make informed decisions, you can't let the data prevent you from doing things that you know are the right things to do. And you have to forge forward, and you have to take the consequences, good or bad. Not everything that we did was awesome. Not everything that we did was successful, but the vast majority of what we did was successful. We have our highest brand awareness that we've had in our company's history. Our brand engagement scores went from 43% to over 90% right now. Our likability scores are all in the 90s. Our business has never been better. Our stock was at $15 a share when we started this campaign. It's near $30 a share a year and a half later. So I encourage you guys to think about the importance of bravery, filter out the noise, and just push forward and do what you need to do. I'm going to play the launch spot that launched the new campaign. And I think when you see it, I think it's a great testament of what I'm talking about relative to kind of doing things different in this banking space.
Remember, here at Ally, nothing stops us from doing right by our customers. Who's with me?
I'm in.
I'm in.
I'm in. I'm in.
Wait, where's Tina?
You doing the hand thing?
Yep.
We're all in for our customers. Ally, do it right.
So everyone was like, Motley Crue? Are you kidding me? You know, even our board was like, I think the lead singer died from a drug overdose. I'm like, everybody died from a drug overdose then. I mean, who are we going to find that didn't? A really different way to come to market, a really different way to kind of reposition our brand, show our people doing over-the-top things, and just have fun. And what ended up happening as a result of this spot is it caught fire. And everybody in social was talking about doing the hand thing. And so we stoked the fire by immediately jumping on it and having a contest and telling people to send in their best content of them doing the hand thing. And then we surprised and delighted people with different prizes for the best pictures or the best content that came in. So again, just kind of doing things differently, being brave, and getting outside of the space. Recently, we did something around the Super Bowl that I wanted to show you guys. This was, I think, another moment of bravery, right? Which is this idea that everybody can buy, every big marketer can buy a spot on the Super Bowl if they want. But for us, we felt like it was duplicitous to spend a couple $1 million on a spot in the Super Bowl when we're out there telling our customers to think about having a savings mindset. So we wanted to take advantage of the biggest day of consumerism by intercepting it and interrupting it in a really unique way. So I'm going to show you a video that I think will give you a good sense of it, and we'll talk a little bit about how it did.
I want my children to know that they always have a place to come back to.
Something needs to be done about what was going on in our inner city.
When she got injured, it was upsetting.
Giving back to them with whatever I earn is one of my top priorities.
So again, a very different way to go to market in a time when, you know, all brands were spending millions of dollars to get you to buy a bag of Doritos or a Mountain Dew by producing giant television spots. We did something, I think, much different than that. And we created this virtual reality app. And again, a lot of questions around it. You know, what if the app doesn't work? What if it crashes that night? What if other brands are mad at us because the app only activated during the commercial breaks? So that was the only time that you could play. We were taking eyes away from the investment that people had in their Super Bowl spots. And again, yeah, there was some risk to it. We had never done it. We didn't know how the technology would work. Mercedes had a bit of a fiasco with the virtual reality idea during the Super Bowl. And for us, it turned out awesome. We had 1.5 million people that came to our microsite. We were number 2 most downloaded app that week in your store. We were number 4 on Apple. We had 70,000 downloads of the app. We had 660,000 rounds of the game played. And what we did is we had the top 15 scores submitted, and we selected the best stories and the high scores, merged those two together, and we granted those people's wishes. And now we're getting the outgrowth of all of the PR that went along with that. And I think just to kind of punctuate, you know, the different way that we went to market on this, our CEO last week wrote a handwritten note to each one of the Big Save winners and congratulated every single one of them on behalf of Ally. So a really cool way to, again, be brave, disrupt, and do something really different, especially in the face of a lot of people saying, why are you doing this? And I don't think it's the right thing to do. I'm not going to go through all of this in detail, but I've been doing a presentation and just saw part of it when we were together in December. But you know, these are the kinds of things that I think CMOs have their eyes on right now. And these are the kinds of things that keep us up at night as we think about the best way to come to market and marketing in this brave new world. You know, I always say to my team, marketing's changed more in the last 5 years than it's changed in probably the 25 years preceding that. And we have to be on a constant learning agenda. I would say I probably spend 2/3 of my time doing my actual job and 1/3 of my time on this learning agenda. And it's really the reign of digital disruption and the way that people are interacting with brands that has changed the way that we have to behave as marketers. And you look at some of these things, right? Personalized omni-channel experiences, this idea that people want to be able to interact with your brand regardless of which device they come in on. You guys know that. But for a lot of big brands that are in the e-commerce space, it's a really hard thing to get right. You know, this idea of speed is of the essence and how impatient people have become. You know, the attention span now of the average consumer is 8 seconds. I read a statistic the other day that was staggering, that because of technology and the ability technology has given us to multitask, the average person packs 34 hours of activity into a 12-hour day. That's staggering. So as marketers, how do we get people's thumbs to stop? How do we get people to look up? How do we get people to pay attention? You know, keeping customer attention, not losing people. This idea of relevance versus cool. We argue about this all the time. What's more important, to be a cool brand or to be a relevant brand? And our thought is relevant because the definition of cool is changing all the time. You know, I think about this idea that with all this data, like I talked about, with all this reliance and everybody's first response always being, well, that's a testable proposition, you know, brand matters. 85% of people still say that their purchases are driven by an emotional connection and that they'll spend more money to do business with the brand that they have an emotional connection with. So as a CMO, continuing to drive that is really important. And then the last one on here, which is I think a kind of a new and emerging one that takes an incredible amount of bravery, is this idea of taking a stand. It's really interesting in the political climate that we're in right now. People are personifying brands, right? They expect us to have an opinion on things. And it doesn't matter which side of the fence that you're on, but with all the issues that are emerging, with all of the movements that are emerging, with a lot of the vitriol that's being spewed in the political climate, people want to know where brands stand. And it's not okay to be neutral anymore. You can't take a pass. But how do you keep your brand safe? You know, when you're wearing two hats like me as marketing and PR, how do I keep my CEO out of hot water when consumers want to know where he personally stands on gun safety? How do we keep our company safe when people want to know where we stand on large societal issues? It's a really interesting space that we've never had to deal with before. 5 years ago, people didn't care what brands thought about stuff. Now they won't do business with you if you don't have an opinion on things. So bravery, I think, is more important than ever before. And for me, and I think this is probably a good segue into the questions, bravery's just never been a choice. It's always kind of been a way of life. I recently got remarried in December, but prior to that, you know, I had been a single mom for about 15 years, raising two boys. And, you know, how do you work and raise two boys and have the bravery when you're in an important job to stand up in the middle of a meeting and say, I've got to go to my son's hockey game and I'm leaving? You know, I've always been a woman in an industry full of men, whether it was automotive or financial services. It was always me and all the guys sitting around the table. And, you know, it's just different for a woman in business, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about that as well. But having the bravery to kind of stay true to who I am and stay true to what I believe in, but also being able to interact in that setting and around those tables. And then always having big responsibility at very young ages. Guy and I were laughing a little bit before we came in here of maybe a lot of it is just people haven't caught up with me yet or figured it out. But, you know, I had my second son. I was, I think, 35 years old. I came back from maternity leave. I had two kids under 2 years old, and all of a sudden I was the account director on the Chevrolet account at Campbell-Ewald, the youngest person ever, the only woman in the 99-year history of the account. And I found myself kind of thrust into a really interesting space at a very young age. And how do you have that credibility, and how do you maneuver through that? And for me, it just always returned to that one thing. And it was that idea of being brave and saying what was on my mind and having a voice and not being afraid to push on the issues that were important to me. And not being afraid to say, I kind of am what I am, and if people don't like it, then I'm probably not right in this culture and I'm not right in this job. And knowing that you can't operate in a world of fear, that you have to operate from a position of strength. And I've always kind of governed myself by this saying that good is the enemy of great. And I guess that's kind of what I want to leave you guys with, is always push for great. Bravery is that spine that runs through all of it. But just remember, it's okay. You can always find another job. You're going to be okay. But at the end of the day, when your career's over, you want to be able to look at yourself and have integrity and know that you did things the way you wanted to do things, and you always stay true to who you were. So hopefully you got kind of out of the examples and the things that I talked about why it's so important. I think you're at a perfect company to continue to have this bravery, to lead the charge in the advancements of where this crazy reign of digital disruption is going, and to kind of never forget about staying true to what your culture means and what it means to you and why you're here. So thank you guys, despite all the technical glitches, we got through it, and I appreciate your patience. Thank you. Sure.
Well, thank you.
Thank you
so much for joining us and talking about what brave means to you.
My pleasure.
I think one of the biggest things that, as a company, that we can take away is the fact about the golden gut. The golden gut, I haven't heard that used in a long time, but it's so
No.
true, that gut feeling of what's really right versus wrong, rather than always being about the data. And as a big data company, I think we get stuck with ourselves, with clients, a lot of different audiences about it has to be data, and we never use us.
Yeah.
Can you provide an example of when you had to really go more with your gut than what the data was telling you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that first campaign that I showed you guys, Truck and Pony, you know, the visceral reaction from people was, it's mean. You're being mean to the little kids. You know, you shouldn't take on the big banks. You're gonna really piss everybody off. Isn't there a softer way to come into this? Why do you have to go out and kind of poke the bear, if you will? And it required a lot of bravery. It required us as a marketing team to kind of unite and come together and say, if you really want to make impact, if you really want to change things, you've got to go this direction. And I knew there was a lot of risk in it. I mean, the reality was if it failed, I'd probably get fired. But it was okay because we just felt like it was the right thing to do. And we pushed forward, and honestly, you know, to this day, it's 10 years later, and people still talk about that campaign. It really defined us. It put us on the map. And last year was the 10-year anniversary of it, and we actually brought the little kids back now 10 years later. And with the launch of the Do It Right campaign, we said, all right, we played a mean trick on you at the time, and now we're going to do things the right way. And so we gave that little girl a pony. We gave her a real pony. And we brought the monster truck kid back, and we blindfolded him, and we had him like in a giant arena, kind of like, you know, Ford Field. And when we took the blindfold off, there was all these monster trucks, and we let them tear it up in a bunch of monster trucks for the afternoon. So, you know, it's just a cool way to bring it full circle.
So with your teams, though, and that golden gut, how do you keep them engaged on that, knowing that the numbers are going maybe left the right way, or telling that right story?
You know, you'll find this odd, but we don't pretest anything. So I don't pretest any creative. I don't believe in it. Now, thankfully, I have a CEO that doesn't want to see pretesting and isn't really focused on it. But there's a lot of times where he'll say, I don't think that's a good spot, and I don't think we should do it, but I trust your opinion, and if you want to go ahead and do it. And I think my team sees that. And I really think you have to walk the walk and talk the talk. You can't talk about being brave. You can't talk about doing things differently. You can't talk about taking risks unless you personally take them. And I think my team sees me take them every single week. Great example, we're doing agency reviews right now. We put all our business up for review, and I was with our CEO last week in front of a bunch of people from my team, and he said, well, why don't I fly out and I'll meet with some of these agencies with you, and I'll bring Jen, who's our CFO. And I said, no. He was like, what? And I mean, this was in front of everybody. I said, I'm not going to these agencies with our CEO and the CFO. They're never going to want to do business with us. And he's like, okay, fair enough. You know, you have to show your team that you're brave enough and you've got the passion, and then I think people will follow.
Well, I think that fits really good into my next question about presence and your ability just to be so down to earth and so authentic. It just draws people to you. I mean, as you moved up in your career and now are sitting in the C-suite, I mean, it can be intimidating for others, but when I met with you and presented with you in front of a bunch of dealers, mind you,
right.
It was like talking to your best friend. So I just would love to hear about how, I mean, you spoke about it a little bit here, but how you maintain that and why that is so important.
Well, thank you, first of all. I have a lot of sayings, but another favorite saying of mine is never drink your own KoolAid. And I hate, as I grew up in the agency business, and I think a lot of you guys probably have seen the same thing, right? As people get in bigger and bigger jobs, they become more and more precious. It's like, you know, our old CEO didn't want any potato chips that were brown, so his admin used to like pluck out the burnt potato chips. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And I always thought to myself, if I ever get like that, somebody please shoot me. I never want to be that person. So I also know that a job can be over like this, especially in the C-suite. You look at things like average tenure of a CMO, 18 months, and you know, you get a new CEO or you get a board member or you do something or the KPIs aren't going in the right direction and you're out. And so my belief is if I take myself too seriously and if I put off that I'm a CMO so I'm better than everybody nobody wants to be around me. And who wants to be around people like that? It isn't very fun. And it's not fun for me either, because I learn from the people on my team every single day. And if they're intimidated by being around me, it's a bad place to be. So I've always kind of stayed true to that. Never drink your own KoolAid. Never let a job or a career define you. You know, when I decide to kind of hang it up, I want to be defined by the kind of leader I was, the kind of person I was, the legacy that I left on advertising and marketing. And I want people to say, she was a really cool chick. I don't want them to say she was an arrogant idiot.
I would agree.
Thank you.
And speaking a little bit to the last slide that you shared, I mean, it's really even amazing how transparent you are about who you were as a mom
Yep.
and raising these boys. How would you say you maintained that relationship with your boys as they grew and also this role so far?
Yeah, everybody talks about balance. Whoever like came up with the word in balance, I don't care if you're a man or a woman in business, there's no balance. It's ridiculous, and it's fairy tale land to believe that you can achieve it. And so for me, my thought was always, I'm going to make what I do matter, and I have a platform where I can make my sons into, really good men. And I can give them experiences that they could never get if I didn't have this job. And so a lot of what I did is, first of all, I picked the things that were really important to them, and I never missed those things. So I think a good example is when my son was a senior in high school, he was on the varsity hockey team, and it was really important to him that I was there, and I travel a ton. And I made a commitment to him at the beginning of the season, and I said, I'm not going to miss any of your games. And no matter what I had to do, I made it to every single game. Now, if any of you guys are hockey parents, you're talking like 60 games. And I just established that, with my boss. And I said, I'm not going to miss any of his games. So I'd literally be like on a 3-day trip. And if he had a game on Tuesday, I'd leave on Tuesday afternoon. I'd fly to the game, and I'd fly back either that night or early the next morning. The other thing that I always did is I brought my boys as much as I could with me. So when I traveled, I brought them with me, and they got to see me in action. I'd bring them to things like this. I still do. I'd bring them to interact with dealers. They were always my date for everything. I was single, so it was my 2 boys and me. And they learned about being in big cities. They learned about getting around airports. You can drop either one of them into any situation, and they're not intimidated by it. And then the time that I was home with them, I just was like really present in the moment. My phone was down, I wasn't on my computer, and the time that we had was for us. And today we have the closest relationship, and I've got 2 stepkids now, and I'm trying to do the same thing with them and just give them an opportunity to kind of see the world through my lens.
That's super helpful. Even for me, as my kids are starting into school, I used to try to be at everything, and you just can't.
No.
So really finding out what they want you at or need you at.
You got to give yourself a break. Like I'll tell you, women have horrible guilt. But I think this advice goes for men or women. Let yourself off the hook. It's okay. Like, do you think that now that my son's 21 years old, he's ever going to remember that I didn't go to one parent-teacher conference? I didn't. He doesn't talk about that. When he's around his friends, he talks about, my mom's got this awesome job, and she's a CMO, and she's done this, this, and this. That's what he talks about. And he talks about the things that we've done together. He doesn't talk about those kinds of things. So give yourself a break. Be where you need to be when you need to be there, but a lot of that stuff, don't worry about it. They're never going to remember.
Thank you.
Of course.
One more question before we'll turn to the audience. About Detroit specifically.
Yeah.
So we know Ally has one of the big buildings. We see your big purple Ally sign up on I like to call it the Crown Building.
Yep.
We're coming down there too.
I'm excited to have you guys down there.
Very soon. And anything, you were mentioning how much you love being down there, even though you drive a very long way to get down there. But can you just give us some things to look forward to or things that you really love about the city?
Yeah, so we were one of the first big companies to move back, or to move everybody downtown. We had half of our employees were there, and then we had some people in Southfield and Auburn Hills and kind of spread out all over the place. And, we had announced that we were going to actually be moving out of the city, and Mayor Dugan came to us and said, give me 2 weeks to put a plan together to keep you guys in the city of Detroit. And he called Dan Gilbert and said, buy a building, we need to keep him down here. And he bought that building, and we rebranded it to Ally Center. And we did something really cool. I actually got to do the design, working with the architects and the design firm, and we gutted 15 floors, and we designed every floor like a different Detroit neighborhood. So everyone is an homage to a different Detroit neighborhood. And it's a really cool way. We sourced all the materials from those neighborhoods. So for instance, Corktown, all the wood on the floors from trees that had fallen in Corktown. And we've got the stories of those neighborhoods on each one of the floors. So we've got big murals with the story of each one of those neighborhoods. And it's a great way to kind of teach the next generation about the city, because you know, I grew up going downtown all the time, but my kids didn't, and I'm sure a lot of the people in this room didn't, and it's like getting people to fall in love with the city again. It's awesome being down there. We pride ourselves on being one of Detroit's, you know, favorite children. We believe really strongly in supporting everything that's important to the city. So whether it's the 4th of July, the fireworks and sponsoring those, you know, sponsoring things with the Red Wings and the Tigers and the Lions, being really active in charities and giving back to the city, having people volunteer, and we've just really immersed ourselves. So I would tell you guys, get out, have fun, especially in the summer. There's so many awesome restaurants down there now. Stay late, have a good time while you're down there, and throw yourself into everything that's going on. The vibe down there is so creative and so awesome right now that it's just really, really inspiring to be downtown. I wouldn't want to be anyplace else. And wear your Detroit pride. I actually got the Old English deed tattooed on my back, so I gotta represent.
Yeah, we gotta represent for sure. Well, now we're going to turn to the audience for any additional questions. Does anybody have any questions to ask Andrea before we finish? Laura?
Sure.
Hi, Andrea. A lot of us actually got our start on the agency side as well, too. So when you mentioned that you were in that big role at 35 at Campbell Ewald, not that I was ever in a big role, I was no one, but I did also start on the creative agency side. So I'm wondering, what do you think now as a CMO who's being brave, taking a lot of really cool, disruptive marketing challenges? What do you think from that time on the agency side prepped you best and makes you competitive and a great weapon?
No, that's a great question, and I'm sure you were somebody at the agency, so don't sell yourself short. So first and foremost, I think that what I learned on the agency side is just about creativity, and I know how to get great creativity out of an agency. That's a really important attribute, right? Because you guys know, especially in the creative world, clients saw off all the sharp edges. Like, you get a really cool idea, and by the time it's done going through the spanking machine, it sucks when it comes out the other end. And so I'm very, very protective of the creative process. You know, I really, while I try and kind of bring our business partners along, I try and really shield the creative process, and I think that agencies feed off of that protection in that agency. I think the second thing is the golden gut that I talked about. Like, I know when I see potential in an idea, and you guys remember from your agency days, an idea is not always perfect the first time, but you know when there's something there. And a lot of clients that just kind of grew up on the client side the whole time, they either test it and it dies, or they can't see the potential. They don't know how to keep moving it along and making it better and making it into something more powerful than it was when it started. And then I think third, just the ability to stand up and present and have a presence. And you underestimate how important that is in business, but you know, when you're standing in front of a board and you need to be able to deliver really powerfully a point of view around something that's potentially controversial, or you know, when your boss says you're going to present at Investor Day and you're in a room and you're, you know, and you're in front of 500 people that are thinking about investing in your company, and what you say could affect your stock price and the way that your company goes forward. Like, if you, and everything in between, right? If you don't have that ability to have that presence and those presentation skills, it's a really tough road. So those things were really important to me. I really took those from my agency time. Yeah, go for it. Nothing's off bounds. I'll tell you anything you want to know.
Check. So, Andrea, Mike, Orlando again. Thank you again for coming in. I feel like Ally is one of the undervalued stories of Detroit. Can you talk a little bit about culture, what you guys are doing within the walls of Ally, what your CEO's, you know, like core objectives are?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I agree. I mean, part of our, it's funny, you'd think that 10 years has been a long time, but it's not for a brand, and it's not for a brand that doesn't spend like the brands spend in the category. So just our ability to just grow sheer awareness and get the story out there has been tough. And honestly, a big part of it was because we were so reactive in PR. And when I took on PR responsibility last year, we said we're going to really go out and start to be really proactive. And that's helped us a lot. The company is an amazing company. Our CEO is 44 years old. He is one of the 5 youngest CEOs in the Fortune 500. He believes very strongly in culture. When he goes out and talks to investors and they say, what is going to separate you from all of the other players in the financial services category? His first answer is always culture. And a lot of investors are like, wow, no one ever talks about culture. And he believes very strongly in a number of things. He believes first, I think, and foremost in diversity and inclusion. And I know that's a really popular thing to say, but it's a harder thing to do. If you look at our C-suite and our executive council, out of probably 18 people on our executive council, we have at least 8 women in C-suite positions. Our Chief Human Resources Officer, our Chief Financial Officer, the President of our bank, myself, you know, the list kind of goes on and on. In fact, our CFO is the only female CFO in the entire banking industry, which is staggering. He's established employee resource groups, so we have 15 different employee resource groups, and you can join the employee resource group that you either identify with or the employee resource group that you want to learn about. And that's been an awesome way, you know, investing budget and time for people to do that. He believes very strongly in being purpose-driven, and we give everybody time. You know, we call it, you know, PTO time to, or VTO time, where they can volunteer and do things that are important to them, and being a part of the community and doing things really different. So this month happens to be Financial Literacy Month, and we did something really cool for that, where instead of just writing a check, we actually wrote a children's book called Planet Z and the Money Tree. And it teaches kids about money and the fact that it doesn't grow on trees. And we have all of our employees going into schools and doing readings of Planet Z and the Money Tree. And if you go on, you know, if you go on any of our social pages, you'll be able to either download a copy, and then we're donating hard copies to schools as well. And then the other big thing that I would say with him is he's not a micromanager, and nobody at Ally is. And we let people kind of soar their wings and go. We have a culture of innovation. We're digital financial services, so we have to stay on the leading edge. Maybe not always the bleeding edge, but on the leading edge. And you have to create a culture of innovation. And you have to, invest in that, even though everybody's always talking about how do I cut expenses. So he's very good about invest, invest, invest. And 2, he's not afraid to let us fail. So you can take reasonable risks, and if you fail, it's a good thing to learn from. And there's no punishment on the other end. You don't lose your job. You know, you don't get a slap on the wrists, you know, even little things like putting that Motley Crue music on the spot. Like I said, our board was really nervous about it, and he was like, if you want to do it, you do it. You're the CMO. Good or bad, you know, it's on you, and I support you. So I think those are the things that are happening at Ally. It's an awesome company. We're going through these agency pitches right now, as I mentioned. For me, I think the next big thing I want to do is just create this awakening around how great the company is, how differentiated our product is, and just get people to pay attention to their money again, and that's what we're really trying to do. Thank you. Yep. All right.
Thank you again, Andrea.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you.